And that brings me to the other thing that I wanted to ask you about, because I remember reading on your website years ago a very moving account of your youthful nihilism and eventually your exit from it. The one thing that I remember that stuck with me is your description of yourself as having to sort of continuously, to use a popular word these days, dismantle everything as though it were like a panel of machinery, and to take out everything until nothing functioned properly because you had to take out everything that smacked of any kind of transcendent meaning. So I wonder if you could tell that story a bit about what it was like to be a nihilist and what got you out of it.
Well, yes, I will. Now, you need to understand, of course, that there's more than one kind of nihilism. There is the pop culture nihilism that says nothing has any meaning. That's cool. Then there's then there is the existential dread kind of nihilism that says nothing has any meaning and we're all perishing. And then there's the macho kind of nihilism that says nothing has any meaning, and I'm one of the tough ones who can know that and still
Yeah.
live. Now, my type was the macho nihilism. It was the proud
Mm.
nihilism, and but I wasn't living. You're right. I use that metaphor of opening up the access panel in my mind and trying to remove every component that had God's initials on it. But the problem is that we're made in His image. Every component has His initials on it. So you just have
Yeah.
to take out component after component after component. There were fewer and fewer things that I could think about. I couldn't think about persons. I didn't believe in them. I couldn't think about personal responsibility. I didn't think that we were free. I couldn't think about the difference between good and evil. I thought that it was just something that we invented. I loved my wife and children. I really did. But I couldn't even think about that. I couldn't understand it any longer, because love is a commitment of the will to the true good of another person. And I, I, I didn't think my commitments were in my control. I didn't believe in persons, and I didn't believe in good. So it was miserable. It was I think God pulled me back after I was pulling out every component one after another, right before I got to the motherboard. And I'm just grateful. It it was a curious thing when He brought me back. It wasn't by, just as I had abandoned Him, not by rational argument, but by thinking that I was too smart and saw through all that jazz. He didn't bring me back by arguments either. Um, I'll tell you how I did come back in a minute, but that wasn't it. And I realized sometime later, it used to frustrate me. Why can't I rationally reconstruct what my reasons were at every step for coming back to faith? And I couldn't do it. And then I realized He had to bring me back that way. He had to bring me back in a way that didn't give me an ounce of anything that I could take credit for, because it had been my pride that had been my downfall.
Hmm.
So that was the only way. And I'm so grateful for the humiliation of it. But what
Hmm.
happened was, I finally, I there was one evening I'd had a quarrel with my wife, and I was weeping. She'd gone to bed, and I finally just said, I remembered something that somebody had taught me back in, children's education, Sunday school, when I was a little Baptist boy, and it was that you could pray to God hypothetically. And I said, well, okay, I don't think you're there. I think I'm talking to the wall. But if you are there, you can have me. But you're going to have to show me, because I can't tell anymore. Now, I don't know what I expected or what I was hoping for. Maybe that the walls would open up and I'd hear choirs of angels, and nothing like that happened. Nothing like that happened. In fact, nothing happened that I could tell. And, my tears dried up, and eventually I just sat there for a while longer and finally went to bed myself. But a matter of weeks later, something did start to happen. I believe that this was God's answer. I began to have a perception, an intuition, a recognition. It was as clear as if I'd thought the sky was pink, and one day I walked out and I saw it's been blue all along. I began to realize that my condition was objectively evil.
Hmm.
Now you got to remember, so what? Isn't that obvious? But you have to remember, I was a guy who'd been telling himself that there's no such thing as a difference between good and evil. And here's something that's evil. Augustine had said that the only way that you can get an evil thing is to take a good thing and ruin it. The only thing you can the only way you can get a horrible is to take a wonderful and mess it up. That's the privation theory of evil. And I'd always thought that it was a nifty argument that didn't have anything to plug into it, but now I had something to plug into it. My condition was evil. There must therefore be something good. And I had no idea what it was. And I just started reading, devouring things. I remember I used to devour C.S. Lewis. I read some Augustine, I read this, and I read that, and I read the other. And there came a time, just as I had drifted out of faith, and there had never been a moment at which I thought, I now do not believe. I came back to faith, and I knew there was never a moment that I was aware of crossing over and believing, but at one point I became aware retrospectively. For some time now I have been believing again. Well, I said he could have me. So what now?